welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Paradyme Podcast. We're so grateful for you guys tuning in. This week's episode, we're going to be talking about Crime and Punishment by Fyodor Dostoevsky. So here's kind of what it looks like. Go check it out. It's been a really awesome read. It took a little longer than expected, but very good read. So this is written by Fyodor Dostoevsky, and it came out in 12 installments from 1866. Do you guys remember where hearing about Crime and Punishment? Because I remember John brought it up as a potential for the last book. But do you guys remember hearing about Crime and Punishment before we actually chose to read it?
I think it was the same author wrote a book that Jordan Peterson references a lot.
The Brothers Karamazov?
The Brothers Karamazov.
Yeah. I think that's how I first heard of it, but yeah, I can't remember anything.
Yeah. How about you, John? Did you hear about this book a lot?
Well, I'd read The Brothers Karamazov because it was on, to be honest, because it was on Lex Friedman released this book list, maybe last year or something. And some books that he wanted to read or that he has read but was going to read again. And there's a lot of overlap on some of the books that I had read, that I'd already read or that I wanted to read. And one of the books was The Brothers Karamazov, which just led me to this book.
So, nice. Yeah, I mean, you figure it'd be isn't he Ukrainian?
I think he's Russian, but I mean, he could be Ukrainian. I don't know. I feel like
Fyodor
back then
has to be on his list, then, you know?
Oh, Lex Friedman.
Lex Friedman.
Ukrainian. Yeah.
It would have to be on his list because it's one of the greats of that eastern side of the world, you know?
True.
For sure. He's the Shakespeare of Russia.
Yeah, I mean, if that's the case, then you have to read it, you know? There's some other people that would be cool to read too. I think Gotye is a playwright in Germany, I think. But Crime and Punishment's been bounced around a little bit. I heard him mentioned Dostoevsky in many JBP podcast episodes, and it was always intriguing to be hey, let's go check this one out. We read Nietzsche for the very same reason.
Oh yeah.
So what I would say in terms of comparing the two, though, this book was a lot. It was easier to digest as a play. You know, we read I was reading a couple chapters. I'm trying to read it like a typical book that we would read analytically. And we came and met, and John was like, yo, you have to read it like it's a play. And that really changed everything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. So it was a long story that had different parts and different scenes that were all building up to an ending. And reading that type of book was pretty new to me. Did reading it as a play help you guys?
Yeah, it did. I can't remember at what point we talked about that, but in my head moving forward, it was easier to read, or it kind of made me feel like I understood things a little bit better.
Yeah, the play was from the beginning because I listened to audiobook when I read.
Yeah.
So the voices of the characters change throughout the book. Nice. So it's nice to just listen and also read because you get the character dynamic integrated.
How do they say the main character's name?
I call him Roz. I don't even try and pronounce it.
Is there the voice when they're speaking?
It's just the same narrator, the person that's reading the book. He just changes his voice whenever the dialogue changes from woman to man. He changes his voice. So
those getting in the character.
Those audiobooks are so sick.
Yeah, do they help? Especially when there's you can't tell where the dialogue switches from people, where it's not back and forth conversation. It's almost just they're in the room together and they're giving the atmosphere what's going on. Yeah, that helps a lot. Him breaking it down that way.
Yeah, dude. In this book, there's a max of 12 characters.
Turn your microphone.
Oh, yeah. There's a max of 12 characters, and in Nietzsche's it was 50 to 100 plus different characters. It was a lot easier to follow, and it had a really digestible story. So I thought it was really good. And in our previous conversation, John, you mentioned that you felt like this was a story of a man in arrogance. I wanted you to kind of explain that idea.
I think it's a traditional story about being a young man. The main character, Raskolnikov, he's 22 or 23. And just this, scientifically or whatever you want to say, that our brain finally develops at 25. And a lot of the older characters in the book note that Raskolnikov have a little potential, but he always seems like real impatient. That's like one of the reasons like why he's arrogant, because like, he has big dreams.
Yeah.
He's smart enough to acknowledge like his poor circumstance, and he's clever enough to find a shortcut to get to where he wants, like in the rat race faster.
Yeah.
He doesn't have any discipline, so he's not doing it at like a gradual incline, like how you're supposed to. So his arrogance is that he thinks he found a clever way to like beat the system, I guess, you know? Yeah. To answer the first question.
Okay. Yeah. And in this book, there's an article that's brought up of the main character of this book is Raskolnikov, and he writes, and he's like a academic. He seems educated. He has a public reputation of being an educated, like young man with possible potential. Right?
He's a former student who dropped out of university because he could no longer pay his tuition. Yeah. But everyone around him in his like community notes him as being like an educated person and not someone of like low standing, because he almost is educated.
So his reputation publicly is that. And so he's still riding that reputation post school, and after school life really changes. But he comes up with this idea and writes up an article where he talks about a difference. There's different types of human beings, right? There's one group that exists purely to reproduce, and that's the ordinary person, right? You're not meant to do anything extraordinary, but you're here to reproduce. And then in the second class are extraordinary people, and one of note is Napoleon. He mentions being a Napoleon, doing, exercising whatever means necessary to achieve your goal, right? You can step on whoever, you can backstab whoever, as long as it gets you to your goal, right? So he, in first part one, he's living in this like closet, right? He's living in this awful apartment. The wallpaper's all messed up. Go ahead.
Real quick, can we just break down? Hey, real quick, stop. Can we break down like, okay, he explains what an ordinary person and an extraordinary person is.
Yeah.
Break that down. So like an ordinary person, which he thinks is this is in his theory, that in his words, I'm summarizing them. An ordinary person are people who follow the rules, who are like cosmically are meant to follow the rules. And if they do break the rules, they are like supposed to be punished, and they will get punished for breaking the rules.
Right.
Yeah.
An extraordinary person is someone who sees the rules and disagrees with them and has like the strength of spirit to not only break the rules, but not be held down and by the consequences of the rules. Okay.
Right.
And he explains that there's like levels to it. There's like 1 in 100, 1 in 1,000. And then there's like, so there's like someone who's like slightly better than like most people, or he's someone who's like acknowledges the system and he like whatever. And at the very pinnacle, like the 0.001%, there's people like Napoleon, Genghis Khan, and Alexander the Great. People who, if you would judge them just by like their sins, they would be considered villains. But some people hail them as heroes and gods, and because they broke all the rules and weren't held to their consequence.
Right.
So, and that's something that, like, again with him, like what the story is about. Every young man's searching like for something to aim at, an archetype to aim at. A lot of times it's our fathers, or like our first mentors, or like our coaches, or like a superstar in a sport, like Kobe Bryant, Michael Jordan. But for a lot of people throughout a lot of history, it was like great leaders of nations or great generals of war. So this particular character is fascinated with Napoleon, who is he's the GOAT for France,
for France.
He's the GOAT of France,
I don't really know much of the history of Napoleon. Do you guys?
No, not at all.
No? Let's just look up a little bit of it really quick. Napoleon, just a little bit.
Just a little bit.
That would be an interesting read, a biography
Napoleon
of
Bonaparte. French military officer and statesman who rose to prominence during the French Revolution and led a series of successful campaigns across Europe during the French Revolutionary and Napoleonic Wars from 1796 to 1815. So it was pretty recent to them. You know, it was like 80 years ago when the book was written, you know, at that point.
Yeah, I think what happened was they like gave him an impossible task, and like he just like kept fucking doing it, and then eventually he did like a coup, and then like they were in power. Then they couped him again. The royals took back. They sent him to an island, and then he escaped the island, and he was like, "Fuck it, boys, I'm back." And they couped again.
They were like,
and took over again. So and they welcomed him back. They're like, "Dude, we're off the fucking red carpet. Our boys back.
The goat's here. Send it up."
So I mean that's like, you know, Raskolnikov. Yeah, I mean everyone would love to be remembered as someone like that.
The goat.
That extraordinary, you know, that extraordinary. Right. And Raskolnikov's a character who lives in a closet. So he's like the complete opposite of that. So he's got to dream of something to make like life bearable.
Right.
You know?
Yeah. And so if people that are extraordinary can step on whoever to achieve a goal, right? Part one leads up to Raskolnikov is pawning some of his items, right? He needs money. So he goes and he pawns, I forget what the item is that he actually pawns the day before or 2 days before. A watch, right? His dad's watch. So he pawns the watch and he's like listening, and you get the vibe that he's scoping. You know, he's like scoping what's going to happen. Oh, she has this many keys on the thing. She has, this is where kind of I think the drawer is where she puts her money. So he's scoping, right? So you already get that vibe. He comes up with a plan to wrap a piece of wood and cap it with a piece of metal, wrap it up, and take it over there to fake pawn an item, with the ultimate goal of actually murdering the pawn shop owner. And he like moralizes it in a sense to himself by saying, you know, like my mom keeps pulling out money from her pension and I don't want her to have to deal with that. Do you guys remember any of the other like reasonings?
Yeah. Well, his side story is that his sister is now to be married to this guy, and even though she doesn't quite say it, Raskolnikov is thinking that she's marrying this guy so they can then be financially more secure, so they can then give more money to Raskolnikov. But that's just an excuse to him. Another thing is that he thinks that this woman isn't like a net good for society, probably a net bad, and all she's doing is like taxing the poor. And he's like, who's like society more like, who's bringing more value, me or her?
Right.
Me. What if I had her resources? Then it would make me even more valuable to mine. Right. So like, and then like that'll propel me to do even more better things in my area. So like, if she dies for me to get one step further, it's actually a good deal for like everyone else. Yeah, except her.
You guys are referring to his landlord, like the
we're referring to the pawnbroker.
Oh, okay.
And Lizaveta. And so he comes up with his reasoning, right, for doing this murder, and he goes over to the apartment and he just does this old lady wrong. You know what I mean? Like
he calls her an old crone.
Yeah, old crone. Fucking, they have a whole skirmish, bonks her on the head, and then her sister walks in, who's not supposed to be there. She gets bonked on the head, and and then he's about to leave, and people are coming up the stairs. So now there's people at the door, and he's at the crime scene. He's behind the door. This whole thing passes where they're like, oh, we need to go figure out if she's here or not. The door should be locked, but it's not locked here. They figure out that there's somebody in the apartment. The people walk away from the door and he escapes from the crime scene. Right. Mm-hmm. And so there's talk around town like, oh, who did it? It could be these people. And there's like identifying suspects. And the main detective on the story is Porphyry. Right. And Porphyry is a master manipulator in this whole play. Strategist. He's so good with detective work. Like he's like telling him Raskolnikov what the whole plan is and what he's probably thinking. I mean, this guy is ultimate chess grandmaster.
Yeah. Let's not jump too far ahead. Yeah. Well, yeah.
Anyway, he's the main guy. Go ahead.
Raskolnikov gets away.
Yep.
There's really no evidence that he was ever there.
Yep.
Yeah, just want to make that clear.
Yeah, and so I think this is due to mental anguish, but he like gets back to his apartment and he starts feeling feverish, right? And like over the next couple of days, he's like in and out. He's like delirious. He like makes his way over to a friend's house, Razumikin. In like a daze, he wakes up in bushes. You know what I mean? He's like trying to think of a way to escape because he leaves with some of her materials, right? It's like some of the stuff he found, it wasn't everything. He didn't get all the money in the apartment. It was such a frantic mess that he left with some items, but he was like, what do I do with these? Because they're going to come look, you know? So now we're watching him like mentally deteriorate post committing his crime. Right. So he's dealing with that. And we're watching him go through mental anguish from this point of the book going forward.
Yep.
Right. And so ultimately this anguish, I think, or we think, you guys can tell me, that this is a story of Raskolnikov learning that he's actually an ordinary person. If his theory and paradigm is correct, where there's extraordinary and ordinary people, he's learning that he's an ordinary person because he might not face the consequences of the murder, right? But he can't deal with it mentally.
Yeah.
Right. And so somebody who's extraordinary in his paradigm would be somebody that wouldn't even care because they're accomplishing a goal. And so we're watching this guy deteriorate, and just a whole bunch of hell breaks loose.
The way it's written too, when sorry not to cut you off.
No, go ahead. Yeah.
No, the delirium or like fever feeling, like the descriptive or the level of description which is written makes you feel like almost delirious too. Like you're like, when did this happen? Or is this a dream? Or like, it leads you into, I guess, like different states of mind or something.
Yeah, the writing was really good where like they'd be having like a 4-person conversation and you could feel the anxiety in the book. You know?
For real. It would like stress me out sometimes, like just like reading, and I'm like, gosh, this is so like negative and like the situation.
It's pretty crazy,
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, the writing style was really good. And now we're watching him deal with a bunch of things post-murder. Some of which being finding old friendships like Razumikin, having a doctor always around, dealing with the idea of do I confess or do I not? Mm-hmm. Right? One pivotal part of the book is part 4. I believe it's part 4, where at some point, word gets through Razumikin to Raskolnikov, the main character who committed the murder, that Porfiry, the main detective on the pawnbroker's murder, wanted to talk to Raskolnikov, right? Raskolnikov makes his way over there to have like an interrogation, but it's not really an interrogation. We're just having a conversation. Yeah. Right. And he's like, man, I read your article. I thought it was so interesting. John, I think you do this so good. You got to do it, dude. How was Porfiry that first time? You got to do it.
I can't do it.
Oh, man. But okay, so what happens is he goes there and he's like, man, like, I read your article. I thought it was really good. I kind of wanted to talk to you about it. And he's like telling him about the extraordinary versus the ordinary people and what he might have thought. And he's like, hey, by chance, when you were writing this, did you think you were an extraordinary person? And like, he makes Raskolnikov actually think for a second. Yeah. And that's when things are starting to kind of crumble around Raskolnikov. That he's actually like a person of interest and like high interest. So you're watching things kind of crumble around the main character now. And he pushes Raskolnikov to the brink. The guy's like pounding his fists on the desk. He's like, I will not be tortured. If you're going to arrest me, arrest me. If you're going to do it, right? And he's like, oh, no, why would I do that? And he tells him his whole MO, his whole procedure is like, I just let the moth fly around the flame. I have a bunch of moths going around the flame, but sooner or later one will fly into the fire. And like, Porfiry was such an insane like mentalist in this book that it was so good.
Checkmated his ass.
Yeah.
Who did Roz try to? Was it Porfiry where he actually confesses, but he acts like he?
No, it was in the bar, right?
Yeah, it was the bar.
Yeah, you're talking about the guy in the bar
where they're sitting down and having a
I
conversation.
forget the guy's name, but yeah, he like told him everything that he would have done. Like, what would I have done with the things I stole? Right? I would have hid it under a stone.
Zazimov.
Zasimov,
Right?
yeah. Or Zasimov, one of those. But yeah, things start crumbling around him. In his like delirious haze post the murder, he's still doing like good things, right? Throughout the story, he's still doing like things that make you think maybe he's not as bad of a character as like he committed a murder, but he's not like that bad.
It comes, I think, the detail around the feverish mental state, and then also the dreams he was having.
Yeah,
I think it comes after that where he starts to kind of like just become normal again.
Yeah,
but the detail, like what you guys are saying, is like once he kills the two women, and he has these dreams and the fever that I think that puts you in his shoes of like a murder. You cannot just murder someone because he's not extraordinary.
Yeah, and clean conscious.
Yeah.
No.
So I think it's that from that point of him recognizing like, hey, if I get caught, like, there is a turning point where he has conversations with like his family and stuff, and then they actually come visit him. I think that's maybe the turning point where he like starts to become normal again, because he starts to worry about other things other than the murder. Yeah, honestly, like he gets involved in things that weren't even like anything to do with him. You know, he like has this conversation with this guy Marmeladov in a bar, and the guy's telling him about his family. He's just a drunk in the bar. Yeah, and he walks the guy back to his house because he's all drunk. He walks into the house and sees how they're in dire straits. You know, the wife starts smacking on the husband, Marmeladov. And on the way out, because it's like such a frantic situation, Raskolnikov puts money because Marmeladov had spent up all their money on drinking. So he leaves money for that family and leaves. And then this is how he meets Sonia. Oh, yeah. Sonia, right? So Marmeladov. Go ahead.
You said like it was all like accidental or accidental or whatever. But, we talked about earlier just like how is this like that he's got any like religious tones into it and stuff. Yeah. You could say that like this was the first time that like God started steering him to the Lord, like meeting that guy. Like that guy is what like met him to Sonia, and like Sonia is what got him to like turn himself in, got him to Siberia. The 8 years in Siberia finally got him to start reading the Bible, and then like the story ends,
Yeah. Right. Everybody's life gets better when he accepts his when he takes accountability and accepts his punishment. Yeah. Everybody's life around him that he wanted to change anyway became better. Sonia became like a person of high respect in a community. Sonia's his love interest.
And like Sonia's like the person who's like I think represents like what religion can do for you, even as a broken person. Like I know you talk about like Raskolnikov, someone who committed murder, but she committed like spiritual murder. So like they're like two sides of the same coin.
Why spiritual murder? Tell us why.
Well, when they introduce Sonia, like when he meets Marmeladov at the bar, Marmeladov was telling him about how his like family's super poor because like he's a fucking loser and a drunk, and they're in such bad straits that his daughter has gotten her yellow card, which in Russia is like the license to be a prostitute. Yeah. She's a prostitute to feed the rest of her family. So like Raskolnikov, who committed murder to get funds to quote unquote like take care of himself and his family. Right. Sonia also did a very big sin. Sonia is a religious person in the book. She's like always like quoting scripture and stuff like that. And Raskolnikov, that's like a big interest. Like he's always like pushing her. Right. He's trying to like figure out like, is she also gonna be at the end of her rope like me, or is there something that's keeping her from like being pushed past the edge? Because suicide is always something that's lurking around in the storyline, not just for Raskolnikov, but for multiple characters. Yeah. And it's actually a twist that does happen to somebody, Yeah.
But so that actually, like, it makes me think of probably the most pivotal point in the book when Raskolnikov goes over to Sonia's apartment, right, for the first time, and they're having a conversation. Okay. They're having a conversation. My boss? What? So they're having a conversation, and Raskolnikov asked Sonya, he's like, have you ever thought about jumping off the bridge, like committing suicide, you know? And she goes, I could never do that to my family. God comes up and he's like, read something from the Bible. And he's telling
he literally puts a gun to her hands and says, like, read the Bible. Like, there's no gun, but that's literally like was like the energy.
Yeah.
She was like crying. He's like, read it. I said, you love the Bible, don't you? You love the Lord? Fucking read it. And she's like, why? He's like, because I need it. I need to hear it.
Yeah, because what he's trying to figure out is like, okay, if she's willing to do her sin, I've done my sin. Like, where's her mind at? Because I'm fucked. I'm like at my wit's end here, you know? Yeah. So she's trying to figure out how she copes with that.
And she's almost at her wit's end too. So he's trying to be like, he's gonna break first. Like, my convictions are your convictions. And that's his whole thing, is like, he had this theory, this conviction of like extraordinary people, but then his conviction's been broken, and so he's like, well, without ever saying it, he's like, is she right? Right. Or maybe I'm right, and I'm like the wrong vessel for my ideas, and that's even a harder pill to swallow.
Yeah, he's trying to figure that out, you know. And so in Sonya's apartment, one of the, like, honestly, if it wasn't a play, I would have thought this was cringy, but he bows down in front of her and kisses her feet, right? And he's like, don't think I did that for you. I did that for all of human suffering. And I was like, So there's a murderer and a harlot in the same room. And they were talking about the Bible, reading the Bible. But yeah, he meets with Sonya, and Sonya, he's like, man, what do I do? He admits to what he did to Sonya, and he's like, what should I do? And she's like, you know, God's like, you should accept your punishment, you know? This is what you need to do.
She was like, you should go to the four corners and scream, I'm a murderer.
Yeah, exactly. Fall down on your knees and tell everybody, because you need to take accountability. And he's like thinking about it. He doesn't know if he's going to do it. And then he gets put into this tough corner. This guy, Svidrigailov, who's like, basically it is Raskolnikov, just a different character. He literally has done his own dark, we'll say, sins that are catching up to him in a sense. And he overhears Raskolnikov, because he's in the apartment next door, admitting to Sonya that he did all of this, right?
One thing I want to say, though, is like, we could say that, like, all the other male characters are like different versions of Raskolnikov, like Razmukin and stuff. He's like, but that's just saying that, like, we're actually all just humans, you know? So like that's the thing. Like, Razmukin is like a version of Raz who, like, they literally have like a very similar background, but he has discipline. So he's always like actually taken care of, you know? So like, Right. At the end of the day, they're just like humans. It's not just about Raz.
Yeah. But Svidrigailov is like Raskolnikov, who like would have taken the path of not accepting his punishment, not taking accountability, and he would have ended up down this road. Yeah.
Right. Actually, he had already he was living that road.
Right.
Like, he
multiple times.
Like he was already past the point of where Raz was at now, and he had moved on to like phase whatever, and so he's living that right now.
Just honestly, full hedonism, because the dude was weird. He just did whatever he wanted to do.
Yeah, the last chapter really exposed.
But I want to say he had a likable charisma. Really, everyone like was interested in him,
right?
You know, so just want to say that too. So he was kind of like, I don't want to say like seductive in a way, but like something like that, you know, like people thought he was attractive, like not like looks, but like his character and stuff. They were interested in him. They're like, he's an interesting guy at the same time, you know,
right,
cool, like he like knew stuff, you know, so
and so he's on his way the second time to the police station to now talk to Porfiry again. He finally comes to the decision that he's going to admit. And before he's heading out that way, is it Razumikin who comes over and he's like, no. He gets to the police station and he hears that Svidrigailov commits suicide, right? And so he has another out. At the very end, he's like, I could get away with this because the only person who possibly knows is this one guy, and he committed suicide. Yep. Like I can get away with this, right? And he's like, all right, well, he was really about to admit to it. And he's like, I just came to swing by and talk. He's like, well, actually, I think I'm going to take off. So he goes to walk out of the police station. And as soon as he enters the courtyard out in front of the building, Sonia's right there with the eyes like, you gotta do it. You gotta do it. So he turns right back around, he goes inside, and he admits to the murder. And from that point, we get to the epilogue.
Yep.
And the epilogue is now what's happening. So Raskolnikov is sentenced to prison time. And for murder, you would expect how long?
Life.
A cajillion years.
But the people...
Death sentence.
Yeah, the people that were analyzing his case to come up with a discipline or punishment for it, they really analyzed his whole background.
Yeah.
Right? They were like, he really was in a delirium. He actually was in poor conditions leading up to it. But he still did good things throughout it. He paid for somebody's, gave some people money. He helped the landlord with her granddaughter, right? So they took into his whole past and actually sentenced him to 8 years. And they sent him to Siberia. And in Siberia, the family comes to visit. Sonia's coming to visit, and their life is just like improving outside of jail for Raskolnikov. And Sonia ends up moving over to Siberia. She like becomes a whole new person, right? She's like respected in town. She's not a prostitute anymore. What does she do? Bridal, like sewing?
She's like a seamstress, sure.
Yeah, seamstress. And she's like respected in the community. So her life improves. Razumikin finally marries Raskolnikov's sister, Dunechka. And like she was
Donya.
Like, yeah, Donya. She was like the catch of the book. Like she's the one that every guy wanted,
Pretty much, yeah. Every guy was like, damn, that Donya's fucking amazing.
Yeah, for real. And so the good guy makes off with the chick, in the end of the book. So that's a good heart feeling.
True.
Good heart
and
feeling.
not just the babe. Donya was also like, she had really good principles. She was sharp as a tack. And she's the type of woman who, when she found out Raskolnikov had murdered those people, she's the type of sister that was like, where's the shovel? I'm gonna help you. I'm gonna help you bury the like
ride or die, for real.
She was ride or die, loyal to the end, and like that was part of the hesitation with fucking Raz with her marrying that guy, because he knows how she is, and if she married him out of like her own principle, she would be loyal to like the worst guy possible.
Yeah. Right.
So the good guy did win in the end, because the good guy got a really loyal girl, and both of them love Raskolnikov. So what's
super,
like the common
super
compound?
smart. Yeah, just he got the girl, so that was really cool.
We're all looking for our Donyas.
Yeah. And then the only person I can think of right now that really had a bad time afterwards was Raskolnikov's mom. Right. So the last time they talk is like, he's like, look, I'm not going to be here for a while. I whatever you hear about me, will you still love me? It's like a whole big scene where it's sentimental with his mom. And he's like, I'll see you later. This is goodbye for now. Right. And so he tells his mom he'll come back, but then he goes and admits to everything, and he goes to jail for 8 years. And during those 8 years, she starts to have this like mental like decline. Like she's like, he's gonna come. Like it just like it feels so bad
because she doesn't know where he is.
Right. Nobody tells her that he's in prison.
But she kind of does know the problem.
Right. Low key, like over the years, she's learning.
Yeah.
And so that she's really the only person that kind of had a decline afterwards, but everybody else's life, because a mother's love,
It's also age too. She's a lot older.
Yeah, she was a little older. Yeah. So, those 8 years are served. Do you guys remember? Does Ras get out at the end?
I don't think so.
It's just him serving his time.
They don't end it. They end it like him like had like 4 years into service, and like him ending it with like picking up the Bible. Yeah. And then he's like, and finally I had hopes for the future. Right. And it's like finally I started thinking about the future of like with me and Sonia and like what's to come. And like that, it just shows that like Raskolnikov is finally able. That's the whole thing. He's trying to learn how to like take accountability for himself, like taking the punishment. Like he was trying to escape the punishment, the accountability for like the murder he did. And like finally at age like 30 something, he's like, I'm ready to finally actually work towards what I want to do, which was like the whole thing that was blocking him. So instead of just working, instead of just like being able to look forward, like I'm going to start working towards what I want, to try taking a shortcut. And what did it cost him? Like 8 years of his life, delirium, his mother dying, like cost him a lot,
right?
You know, and a lot of drama, you know.
Yeah, towards the end of the book, I got like he found his forgiveness for himself.
Yeah,
to where he can start his new life.
Yeah, he like he probably got rid of that mental delirium a little bit. You know, in jail he didn't want to see them sometimes, but like
because I think he was still dealing with like the unworthiness of like how does Sonia still love me through all this stuff? Like I'm not worthy. Like, and he finally picks up the Bible and he's like, I'm ready to forgive. I'm ready to like
figure it out.
Yeah, because her way worthy.
Yeah. So overall, I want to hear you guys' thoughts on the book.
I like it. I like what you guys talked on in the beginning, how it kind of shows all the characters through a human sense, even though Roz gives the metaphor of him living through this life of wanting to be great, like wanting to show the world that like he is not just ordinary. And I like how the book starts like that, like his article and his philosophical approach behind his writings. And it's interesting to hear the interrogator kind of push him on his own understanding of who he actually is. And I think that's the moral that I get behind this story. It's like it's very detailed and you can kind of get lost in the dialogue, but there is, I think, the underlying message is you're human, you are capable of great things, give it time, and then be able to forgive yourself when like it doesn't go the way you want it to go if you're looking for shortcuts. Because if you are looking for shortcuts, which is going to happen because you're human.
It was almost a warning though, like you know, in a sense, like if somebody was thinking they were like a extraordinary person and they read this book, it's a story of like it's a warning case of like this is what, if you take this shortcut, this is what happens, you know, like mental anguish, having to deal with, you know, it's a possibility. So even thinking about Napoleon, like he had to have gone through all those things too, but I don't know how he overcame it, but he overcame that stuff and sailed back to where that might have to be a
banished
biography
him.
We read.
That's what I think. I think so. I would agree.
Oh yeah. All right, John, David.
I like this book because the play like drama that we were talking about, or how like imagining that book in that sense. I think that's what made me enjoy the book a little bit more. But I think starting out first, like the first chapter or so, it was a little hard for me to get into. And like kind of understand. But I think it grew on me. I think it's it's an amazing piece of literature.
Is it because it's slower tempo than books that we're usually reading? Like slower tempo? What made it like hard to read?
Just like I think the names and like how dense some of the like interactions were, like mentally, you know, and kind of like following along, like knowing who's who and what just happened.
Keeping track.
I don't know. Maybe I'm just not that great of a reader.
Yeah, not even like the dream states too.
It's an introduction to a new type of reading that we've gotten, you know, like, and now if I come across a new book like Endurance, if I would have known, hey, maybe it's a play, it would have been a lot better for me to read, you know?
Well,
it's a new type of reading.
You guys keep saying that, but like traditionally, most books are just stories, you know, like, so like that's how you read a book, guys. Like most books, it's like a movie. It's a fucking slow burn. You're like, well, I started thinking, you know, it's like, we've just been reading like fucking like analytical books,
right?
You know, but like most books are read like that. Most books are read as a story. Like I would say majority of books are stories.
Well, like for me, you know, I haven't actually sat down and read a book like if we're talking regular storybook, and since pre-college. Everything that I've been reading is scientific literature or like textbooks.
That's not true. Didn't you just read 1984 and stuff?
I listened to that.
Oh.
Yeah. I listened to it, but it was like sitting there and reading it, not analytically. You know, there's the different types of readings, you know? There's analytical and then there's more casual. I was reading it, trying to read it a little bit more analytically because most of our books up to this point have been analytical.
That's how I was reading it, yeah.
So I came into it with a different thought process, and then when it clicked, it finally like made the book a lot better.
Yeah.
All right, John.
I feel like I grew up reading like Harry Potter books and shit, so like, I just, like that's how you're supposed to read. I like the book. I give it an 8 out of 10.
8 out of 10.
Yeah, like well, I thought it was. I love a good story that's got like a deep character, like a strong archetype. Like, what are we trying to talk about? I feel like Brett Kalnoff is like a version of myself in the past, like when I was 23, you know? And like that's not too far away. I can like reflect and be like, am I trying to take more accountability in my life? You know, like the delirium he feels, like we've all had like really strong mental anguish in some capacity of our life, whether it's like strong emotion, death, whatever it is, you know. And it feels like you're sick. It feels like you're like incapacitated. All like the variables like that are affecting it. Like sometimes like when you're trying to explain it to people, it's hard. Like that's how life is. Like there's so many multiple variables on like why you make a particular decision. And then when you mess up and people are like, why did you do this? Like it's hard to fucking unpack like all the dense things that are moving around in your life to get you to feel into this point, you know? Mm-hmm. I love like how it explains a real thing that is common in the book is it always explains the living conditions and the rooms that people live in. And I think it's to show like what that does to the human psyche. Like I've lived in like small apartments and big houses, and like when I live in a small apartment, I feel small. I feel like that like I'm not as worthy as maybe other people in like my community because they live in big houses. And like when you feel that way, you feel like more cornered, more vulnerable. You feel like maybe like you feel more desperate, right? Mm-hmm. And that's what Raskolnikov was. He was this desperate, arrogant, like naive person who like thought he was great. And he had his ideals challenged and they were broken, you know?
Right.
So, and we've all had that too. Like, I feel like I've had my ideas changed before when I was young, because like, I feel like what you thought was right when you were like 18 is like, and there's always characters in the books who are like, Raz, you're like super smart, but you're making a bad decision, or like, you're not seeing this shit through. So I thought it was good. Yeah.
You say 8 out of 10. Why 8?
Well, I'm like that one guy. Like it's like 1 out of 10 can't use 7. I think it's a good rule.
Kevin Samuels.
So, yeah, Kevin Samuels. I think it's a good rule.
So it would have been a 7.
And no, I think it's a solid 8. I think it's a solid 8. Yeah.
Okay. What's yours?
Yeah,
what would you say? What
I didn't say it was so 8.
I'll give it an 8.
Yeah, I think 8's a good number. Yeah. I wouldn't know what a 10 would be, but yeah.
The Bible.
Easy. The Bible. Done.
The Bible.
The only book that's perfect is the one that the Lord made, just like Jesus and humans.
Yeah.
Hell yeah, dude.
The Word.
All right. Well, anything else to say about the book before I wrap it up?
Nope. Just go read some books.
Go read some books.
Go read some books.
All right, y'all. Thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of Paradyme Podcast. We hope you enjoyed the show. Before you take off, make sure you follow us on all the social media platforms. Subscribe, hit the little bell. We're on IG. Go check us out on Spotify. We're on all of the platforms. So if you want to listen to this as well, go check us out there. Give us a 5-star review. We greatly appreciate it. So again, thank you guys so much for tuning in, and have a great day. And don't forget, what you do now equals who you'll be tomorrow. Peace.